Bill, let me tell you something of my theological history. As a youngster, I genuinely believed that there was a God. I went into science, brain science, and learned a lot that maybe made things a little confusing. But then I had a period where I absolutely firmly and deeply believed in God, and then spent several decades doing other things, always having a lingering wondering about things. And now, as I begin to sort of reflect on life, I'm not that old, but as I do, I really want to ask the question, how should we begin to think about God's existence? What are some of the ways we should begin, rather than the arbitrary ways I've done it in the past?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've got small children, a daughter that's 8 and a son who's 6, and for a while there, I was memorizing things from the Westminster Catechism with them. And one was, what is God? And I think it starts something like, God is a spirit, infinite, eternal, and just lists a whole bunch of attributes. And I think we went for about 6 months without looking at it. And then when they came back to it, I said, well, give me this, because I used to know it just by memory. Couldn't remember a thing. And I think, all these attributes, all these things that we think about in abstraction about what God must be like, I don't think it really means a whole lot. I think what makes the difference for people, I think, is religious experience, but the sense of God's activity in a person's life. And I think that's really what was the difference maker for me. I was raised in a nominally Catholic home. I had always a sense that there was some sort of divine presence in the world, but in my late teenage years, I actually turned against that, this conception of God. I thought, I still believed that there was a God, but this God seemed very distant, and I thought, how could this God, who's supposed to be so perfect, understand the human condition, deal with, in a sense, the problem of evil was looming there. Mm-hmm. And it was finally, in the sense, actually it was, for me, the solution ended up being the Christian solution, that God had become a human in Jesus Christ, and then knew the human condition. And that was the important thing for me, that God could know what we're going through, and know it not just by description, as it were, standing outside and looking at things, these people, they're really messing up their lives, but having been part of it himself. And so that was the difference maker for me.
My frustration is, and I hear a lot of people say that, and that's a common experience, that you have to experience it yourself. Mm-hmm. I fundamentally don't trust that in myself. Mm-hmm. It's not that I want verification, but I would believe that if the world were created by a God, that there either is evidence or no evidence, or things that I can know to make that. Because if I feel something, because I want to believe in God, I'm not on the. I really do. Yeah. I really do. And because I do, I'm fundamentally distrustful of my own sense.
Well, I think that's good, but I think you also have to start with where you are. And I think in my case, there were some fundamental questions that I was asking, and I felt that God had answered them. Now, you have to move on from there. I mean, because I think you're right. You have to check it out, because all sorts of people have religious experience. Right. Mass murderers have religious experiences. Right. So
there's a lot of brain science that shows that you can stimulate the temporal lobe, or you can recreate that. There's a lot of arguments. So I'm looking for some independence.
Yeah. So I think even though I think that was the start for me, religious experience, and not some argument for the existence of God, I think as things progressed, though, for me, I did need some sort of intellectual ballasts to keep me in place. And I think things more in the natural theology tradition, seeing God's handiwork in the world, trying to see that there was a wisdom, a purpose behind things, and this my whole work in intelligent design that eventually tied into that. I think that was important. I think we try to make sense out of the world. And did my Christian faith, as I started exploring it and reflecting on it, did it make sense out of the world? Were things coming into place? Was there a coherence, a consonance? Or were things all getting kind of jumbled up, and was I not able to really account for the sorts of things I was experiencing?
So let's talk about that, the making sense out of the world in terms of whether or not God exists. You have the personal feeling, and I respect that. I don't have that in the same way. I might want that, and as I said, and if I had it, I distrust it. So I don't know. I don't even know if I want it. but I really want to go further. And so from your work in intelligent design, what can you say in terms of the overview in tracing the history? I know you've talked about signs, for example, that is certainly in the Bible and maybe in the world too. Do you see the God that you believe in as implanting signs in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, that is very important, that this God make a difference. I mean, it's a quote that's attributed to C.S. Peirce is, for a difference to be a difference, it has to make a difference, and if you're just, I mean, God can just be a word. So, in what sense does this belief in God make a difference? And seeing that there are signs of God's handiwork in the world, both in our personal lives, that God is guiding us, and then I think in the world more generally. I think that has been important, very important, I think, in me making sense out of my faith. And so, particularly with intelligent design, I mean, the whole thing is finding, if you will, signs of intelligence in the natural world, in cosmology, and also in biology. And so a lot of my work is focused especially on the biological side, trying to see if there's any sign of intelligence there.
You've also given a historical view and placed your work in intelligent design in recent date in a historical context, looking at the conceptions of the world in pre-modern times, pre-scientific times, which most people would tend to disparage. You find some things in there that might be a closer sense of reality, when the world was maybe had less of a scientific approach, that some would say.
Well, I think there was a sense that the world was fundamentally open to divine activity, and that God could make himself known to his creatures and to humans in particular. And I think that you really lost that. I think often Darwin is made the bogeyman, but I think there's a sense in which, with the rise of modern science, there was a mechanistic worldview that took place. It was very much the world was a clockwork, and perfect clocks are those which don't need to be reset. They're ones where the whole mechanism can just do its own thing. So very quickly that view pushes you to a deism, and maybe not even that, because you have a world where clocks just can make themselves.
Yeah, deism, where God wound it up and just went off someplace, had nothing to do with it, but set it up. And as I said, the next step after that, there was some necessity to that process, and if there was a necessity, you don't need anyone to start it off if it's necessary.
But the sorts of design arguments that emerged during that time then also looked, to, as it were, the technology of the day, to clocks. Now, it's interesting, if you look at older design arguments, they used different, if you will, technologies. And ones that I find much more congenial are those of some of the church fathers, where they may look to a musical instrument. And unlike a clock, which ideally would never need to be set, a musical instrument is designed. You can see it. There's an aesthetic dimension to it, but also it properly has to be played, and played by a master musician. So there's a sense in which the metaphor of the musical instrument allows for an interaction of God in the world, which you don't really have with the clockwork mechanism.
Yeah, and I think what would follow from that is the argument that if you have to have God intervening, or in your beautiful metaphor, playing the instrument sounds nice, but some would say, well, are you making God a tinkerer? That God couldn't get it right the first time, so he's got to keep kind of working it.
Yeah, but the tinkering doesn't really apply to music. You don't think of Arthur Rubinstein tinkering at the keyboard, right? Or Jascha Heifetz tinkering at the violin. So it seems that there's an appropriateness, if that's what the world is like. And this God, that he could interact in a way aesthetically with the world, in a way that doesn't violate its integrity. It seems to me that's really what these older pre-modern notions, if you will, get at. So it's a very rich subject, this, how do we make sense out of God? And it seems that people find many different ways at it.